Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And today, my voice is weird, so Nathaniel's going to be doing most of the talking.
Aren't we all in for a treat?
We are. And luckily, this is your episode. He did all the research for this, so we're good to go.
We're good to go.
And we are continuing our new series, Behind the Scenes. What is it called?
Off the Beaten Path.
Thank you. I think my brain also not doing great today. It's been a rough start, y'all, but here we are. So we're continuing our series Off the Beaten Path, and we're talking about architectural madness.
Bum, 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 bum.
Bum, bum, ba-dum.
That is called Soundscaping, brought to you by Darcy Nathaniel.
And before we get into it, we want to thank everybody so much for following us, for leaving reviews, for contacting us. It means so much to us as people, and it also helps us out a lot in the algorithm.
Absolutely.
If you want to leave a review or follow us, you can do so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can also find more information, if you want to, on our website, onlyabag.com, where you can find lots of articles written by us, and you can contact us there if you have any questions about an upcoming trip or an episode, anything like that. You can also find us on Instagram at onlyabagpodcast, and you can send us a message there. We don't post very often, but we do exist, and we will respond to your message. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so by using any of the affiliate links in the description of this episode or any episodes or on our website. If you book through one of those affiliate links, you will not be charged anything extra, but we will get a small commission from that company. We don't represent them, but they do give us a commission if you use the link.
Yeah, I think for legal purposes, we don't represent them.
Exactly. And you can also donate directly to us by going to ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/onlyabag.
And thank you all again so much for your support, your continued support, and for listening. We deeply appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So let me set the scene slightly for this one. I want you to imagine that you're on Instagram or Facebook. You're scrolling through. You're having an evening to yourself. Right? You're maybe a glass of wine. You're just relaxing. You're scrolling through a cup of tea. It's a really relaxing evening. A little cup of chamomile. Chamomile? And, you see this one of those sort of generically sort of Italian tourism pages Visit Italy or Life Italy or Italy Love or whatever it is. And they've posted a photo of something. And you're like, this doesn't look like Italy. It's a castle, but it doesn't look like Italy. Because it doesn't make sense, right? It looks like it should be fake. You have this sort of Moorish, Art Nouveau, medieval thing happening. It looks kind of like an AI hallucination. You immediately go to report it for AI art because you're like, I don't stand with AI art. This is ruining my relaxing evening. What if I told you, though, that it is a real place and it's called Rocchetta Mattei, or Mattei's Little Castle, which is a fun and cute name for it. So why does this amalgamation of times and styles exist? That is my big question when I first saw this photo and I first called it really bad AI art, because I'm like, there's no way that actually exists. And it does. But to understand the house, I think we first have to understand the founder, Cesare Mattei. And now for the purposes of this episode, I'm not going to keep saying Cesare. I'm just going to say, or Cesare.
I think it's Cesare.
Really?
Yeah, like Caesar.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know.
I was just like Julio Cesare, but
that sounds good.
Cesare. Just it brings him down a little bit.
I don't know Cesare.
Oh, Cesare. So we're just going to call him Caesar for easier. For my God.
That was
for
amazing.
Easier. For ease. There we go. For ease. Caesar for easier. It's like Little Caesar's pizza. Caesar. I'm calling him Caesar, not Caesar. What?
Yeah, Caesar. That's what
we're
you
going to call him Caesar. So I think that was a really strong start, and it went right off the rails there.
It's been great so far.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Cesare Mattei. Cesare Mattei let me just give him a little background, right? Let's start simple. He was born 1809 in Bologna, which is at the time was part of the Papal States, not part of Italy. This is before Italy, into a fairly wealthy upper class family. If you've ever seen Bridgerton, it's kind of like that. It's sort of like one of those families where everybody knows everybody and everybody's kind of well-to-do and famous. And it's like, you don't need to know oh, do you know the Johnstons? Which Johnstons? There's only one Johnstons. We all know the Johnstons. It's kind of like that kind of family. And when he was 28, he actually helped found the Cassa di Risparmio di Bologna, which is the fancy way, or the Italian way of saying the Bologna Savings Bank. And in fact, just as a fun little tidbit, it existed up until 2007 when it was bought out by Intesa San Paolo, which is Italy's largest bank. So this was all simply to say the guy did have a bit of money to play around with, which he uses later to build a interesting house. And now, while he was upper class and wealthy, he was not titled. Not until Pope Pius IX bestowed on him the title of Count, partly in recognition of his defense of the Papal States during the Revolution of 1848 to 1849, but also because he donated some land around Comacchio, Comacchio. I see the CH still, and I still go straight to the ch sound, Comacchio, which is a town about 50 kilometers outside of Ferrara, which I imagine probably helped his cause and made him a count. Now, the Revolution of 1848 and 1849 had a fairly large effect on him. Up until then, he was sort of pushing for this governmental lifestyle. You know, he was well-to-do, he had all the right connections, he had money, he had enough to get himself started. But between his mom passing in 1844 and then the sort of political fallout around the revolutions of 1848 to 1849, he decided, you know what, public life, it's not for me. He decided he had enough, and he did what all wealthy people do with too much money and too much time. He started a supplement company. This was called so this is called
I'm making an astonished face.
It's not quite a supplement company, but it's the closest you could get to in 1850s. It's called he started a brand of medicine called electrohomeopathy.
Yeah,
Now
sounds like supplements,
right? And when I first looked at part of electrohomeopathy, I was a little nervous that he was electrocuting people. He was not.
Okay, good.
So I just want to throw that out there.
Is it like electrolytes?
That's close, actually, to it. It's much closer. I wasn't going to get into it too much, but it is essentially, and I'll get into it a little bit, because he does, the Rocchetta Mattei, the castle/house he builds, is part laboratory, part sanatorium, part sort of a villa where people come and recover.
Okay.
So it was pretty integral to his practice of electrohomeopathy. But since you've asked, as just a brief aside, it is related to, he believed that plants have a type of electricity, whether red or blue or green or white, and that you could distill the electricity of these plants into tinctures, into remedies to take, and it would help with various problems. A lot of it had to do with like the sort of micronutrients of plants, which I know is still a talked about sort of thing. In electrohomeopathy, while it's pretty much fallen out of favor in a lot of countries, it still has a small following in various places. I think in the last 10 years, there was some sort of like a summit for it. And it had a pretty rough start, middle, and end, I would say, though. It never...
Just all the way through.
Well, I think it started with him claiming that it could cure cancer, and then it very much couldn't.
Yeah.
And it went downhill
That's a big
from there.
claim.
It's a huge claim, and I think actually because it was immediately written off. But I will say this is at the time where the germ theory was overtaking the miasma theory as like the prevalent theory in the medical world. So already people were saying like, wait a second, it's not the air that's making you sick, it's these little things you can't see. And so there was already this big kind of shift into understanding new sicknesses. So he was saying, what if it's basically the food you eat? What if you're eating wrong kinds of food? Which, again, is a pretty valid way of thinking, because we do know now that, obviously, food is a huge, effect on your health.
Yep.
So it kind of made sense, but they actually ended up doing a study in London when he was alive, basically saying, we'll have 10 patients, I think it's 10, who all have cancer. Specifically breast cancer, and you will treat them as you do. Or not specifically him, but Matteists, if you will. And none of them got better. All of them got worse.
Oh, okay.
And not worse, but like not better. So it progressed. And essentially they were saying like, that clearly does not work, but it didn't necessarily make it not still very popular. And it had a huge success, which again, later helped tremendously. So in 1850, done with political life, done with politics life, done with everything, he wanted to go and do something else. So he bought a little bit of land in the Reno Valley, or specifically overlooking the Reno Valley, which already had the ruins of a medieval fortress. He was very excited by this. And on November 5th of that year, which I don't think has anything to do with Guy Fawkes, but remember the 5th of November, he laid the first stone with what he called his Rocchetta, meaning little castle, which is why it's called Mattei's Little Castle. I personally picture him completely alone up here on a foggy day, just putting a stone on the ground and going, yes. On this site I shall build my house. He also probably called a construction company not long after, because this is mid 1800s. Like, there are construction companies at this point. It would still, though, be 9 years, 1859, before he moved into his house, before it was actually to the point where he was kind of ready to live. And he wanted, and therefore did, style himself as a medieval lord. While the 1800s is a long time ago, there were no medieval lords, just to be very clear.
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking, like, you know, there's the Wild West of America kind of thing happening. There's like
True.
other 1800s things. This isn't, I was going to have a lot more, but I'm like, 1800s is like, I mean, this is honestly I believe, yeah, must know, because the whole Bridgerton takes place in mid 1800s, doesn't it?
I think so.
Because I think the early, the Queen Charlotte ones, this is not supposed to be a subtle advertising for Bridgerton, I apologize, but the Queen Charlotte is after the failed war on the Americas, like the Americans were
yes.
successful, so that was the fallout of that. And I think Bridgerton's early to mid 1800s, so this is like Bridgerton, which, I mean, there were lords, but they're not medieval with like serfdom and this and that.
Right.
There's freeholds and leaseholds and things. I just threw out the two words I know about how people buy property in England. None of those are right. I apologize. So he basically styled himself as a medieval lord. He did have like a retinue. He had people living that castle with him. He's like, you know, we're going to have, not necessarily as like serfs or below him, but certainly as a retinue, if you will. Like, he's like,
Were they like servants or just?
they were more just like his wealthy friends.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I think he possibly had servants. It looks like
court.
like a court. He hired a
Okay.
court. So that was a big part of his motivation. And he wanted this Rocchetta to look like a medieval castle. He really wanted to rebuild this castle, kind of not the way it was, but enough like a folly, if you will, like a sort of a new castle where he could live in with all his friends and do castle things.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. And he happened to start the electrohomeopathy practice at the house as well. And it honestly came at the perfect time in the world, and for him specifically, because essentially he has this hot new product, right? He's like, you're sick. You don't know why. The whole medical world's upside down right now, but it's the electric fluids of plants. And so he started treating people, and he had a brand new space now to treat these people in his house. So because of his connections, mainly, he started getting a lot of aristocrats, a lot of bourgeoisie, a lot of wealthy people with a lot of money who were really honestly trying anything at that point, right? And some of it too, I think, is now like you always have this sort of wealthy people who are doing weird, you know, medical. The People magazine always has like the weird, like, this is what this person's trying, and you're like, why are you trying that? It's like powdered Cheez-Its helps me look younger. I'm like, I don't think it does. You don't have to roll in powdered Cheez-Its. That's not a thing anybody does. But there's always like that one section.
I would do that.
I know you
guys. I just really like Cheez-Its.
There's that one section of the People magazine where they talk about this is what crazy new health thing is on the rise today. Mm-hmm. It feels a little bit like that. So you do have all of these wealthy people coming mainly for the peace and quiet, but also to get better. And it did lead to a very small boom around him of these sort of beneficial villas, basically, where it's essentially you'd come get away, be in the mountains above the valley, kind of like, you know, when people were sent to Switzerland to take in the fresh air kind of thing.
Sounds kind of nice.
That was the vibe, right? It seemed really nice. And he did have some really well-known patients, including three fun patients I figured I'd tell you about just to set the scene. First off, there's the fairy tale king himself, Mr. Ludwig II of Bavaria. I know very little about this guy. I saw that he was called the Fairy Tale King, and I thought that is an amazing name. I love that. I would love to be called the Fairy Tale King. He was later declared insane, and then now a lot of evidence points to that being a political declaration more than a medical one, because all he wanted to do was build castles.
I think I've heard of this man.
Basically, like, I wrote my note of, can't a man have a passion? But essentially all the nice castles not all the nice castles, but a lot of the really interesting castles in Germany were built by him. Like it's not the Neufchâtel, but it's the Neuschwanstein Castle. I'm already messing that up. In Germany, there's some other nice ones, but they all look, again, like out of a fairy tale, like very much like you'd see it in like Cinderella or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then essentially he was declared insane, and after his trial, he either killed himself or was murdered.
Oh.
At the time, it was assumed that he and his doctor killed himself, but later evidence, like more recent to today, shows that he was not, in fact, he did not kill himself, but he was in fact murdered because somebody wanted him to not ever challenge the throne again. Fascinating guy. Okay. He also went to this guy's house, this guy being
fellow
Caesar's
castle
house.
Lover.
Well, and I think a fellow castle lover, but it will, as we find, possibly has some effect because it was what started as a medieval castle has very much changed over the years. And a lot of it might have to do with people who are like, how about you do this? How about you do that? And we'll get into that in a second. Then there is the Alexander II of Russia, also known as Alexander the Liberator, who actually abolished the serfdom in Russia, which I thought was fascinating.
Cool.
And the reason I
Good
put
for
that
him.
in because you have Caesar is over here trying to make himself like a sort of medieval lord, and you have one of his guests doing the literally exact opposite of that. He also was murdered. Yeah, none of these people have a happy life. They're all
Wow.
getting murdered. He's murdered by bombers. There was like, I got down a rabbit hole because I had no idea. Somebody threw a bomb at his carriage. He was fine. And then somebody else in the crowd yelled, apparently, it's too early to thank God, threw another bomb, killed him. Didn't actually kill him. He died about an hour later when they brought him back to the castle. And there was a third person in the crowd with a bomb, didn't use the bomb. But it's like wild. And essentially, I was basically going into like, oh, what was the reason behind it? And I was like, this is not related to the guy's house at all. So it was way too off topic, but I thought it was fascinating that all three people, although three of the very famous people met some sort of sad endings. And the third person is Sisi, also known as Elizabeth, specifically Elizabeth of Austria. This is neither here nor there. I thought it was a fascinating piece of information because she also was murdered. She used to like to wear very tight corsets.
Okay.
Because she apparently was very much into having a thin figure, even later in life. She's like, I really want a thin figure, a thin waist. So she wore these tight corsets.
Okay.
Unbeknownst to her, when she was in Geneva under a different name, because there had been some threats made to her person and to just sort of, it was not a good time to be walking around as a royal, essentially. And so she was traveling incognito, but she apparently also never really liked the retinue. She didn't like the traveling in the box with the carriage and the people and this and that. She's like, no, it's me and my handmaiden, my maidservant, my friend, my confidant. We're travel together.
Lady's maid, perhaps?
Lady's maid, that's the one. Thank you. I'm like, I've seen enough Bridgerton to know what it's called. And she was stabbed with a very thin file used to actually apparently not sharpen, but create the holes in pins, in needles. So it's a very thin, basically, piece of metal that pierced her and apparently into the heart. She felt really weird after that, was able to walk to the ship, the steamer ship that was leaving. But as soon as he undid her corset, she ended up bleeding out.
Isn't that used in a movie?
It is used in a Sherlock episode. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Which is fascinating because I think the Sherlock book is based off does not use that, I don't believe, as a technique, but this one uses he's stabbed through a belt, and it's as soon as he takes off the belt is when he starts bleeding out.
Yeah.
And it's a similar thing. I will I'll throw in there that she was killed by an Italian anarchist. I do apologize to everybody because just not doing well on the world stage there, named Luigi Lucchini. And this is not about the house at all, honestly, but I thought it was fascinating because...
Do we know why he did this?
Oh, yeah, we do. Zero planning, by the way, involved. This guy could not plan for the life of him. He basically, according to him, he went to Geneva to kill the pretender king of France, the Duke of Orleans, but Orleans because I'm American. Orleans, if you will. So he went to kill the Duke of Orleans, who apparently, this guy, again, not planning, not doing any research ahead of time, had already left Geneva, and he was bummed out. But then he read in the paper that Sisi, the Queen Elizabeth of Austria, was traveling under an assumed name because apparently that's all papers had to do back then was let people know that royals were there. And he thought, beautiful, great timing. I'm going to go kill her instead and as I quote, he just came to Geneva to kill a sovereign and he wouldn't leave until he'd killed one, which is a wild frame of mind.
Okay.
Wild frame of mind. He's an anarchist. Mm-hmm. And he also did not do the research to find out that Geneva had abolished the death penalty. He thought they would catch him because he was not going to hide, and then he would martyr him. They were like, we don't have the death penalty anymore. That's just life in prison. He was furious. He ordered to be sent to another canton or a region of Switzerland where they did have the death penalty. They said, no, life in prison. He ends up killing himself in prison because he's like, you know what? Someone needs to know what I've done. And everyone's like, no one cares, actually, that you've done this. So
until we mention it on the podcast.
Until you mention this podcast. And it's just... Okay. It's a very long way of saying that a lot of well-known people pass through the Rocchetta Mattei, and most of them have had very sad lives, it turns out.
Wow, yeah.
Which is really neither here nor there, but some of them had a penchant for architecture, which I thought was fascinating, and it does a bit play into this. But going back to the Rocchetta Mattei, the topic of this podcast.
I'm loving this, though.
episode,
It's
I'm
fascinating.
so sorry. Everyone's like, "What is so much murder involved in this house?" No murder, I don't think, is involved in this house. I don't know if anyone is murdered in the house ever. It's just fascinating that I don't know. Anytime you start looking into history, it's not like, oh, and these people die peacefully. It's always like, oh, this person was brutally
Tragedy.
murdered
Yeah.
for the throne, and you're like, oh, okay, that was wild. Okay, so the point is, I think because of this income stream, it looks like the Rocchetta Mattei was under constant construction. So Caesar had originally set out with this idea to like stop at a certain point. I'm going to build a castle. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to love it. You're going to love it. We're going to put some people in there. They're going to drink some plant juice. Great day. And instead, I think with a lot of money and a lot of different interests and people coming through and different ideas, he was like, well, what if we do this here? And what if we do that here? And it started constantly changing. Additions, alterations, improvements, well after 1896 when Caesar died. It wasn't even completed by the time he died, which is a bit of a bummer because he was sort of living in a sort of half-finished house. But at a certain point, I also get it because if you're sort of, there's that once it's finished, then it's done and I have nothing else to look forward to type thing. So I can understand like keeping it going. That being said, though, it was almost complete by the time he died, just not actually complete. And then when his adopted son took over, which I'll mention soon, he made a bunch more renovations and a bunch more additions, so it kind of never, ever was complete. It reminded me, though, of the Winchester House in San Jose.
Yes, I was just thinking of that.
That is and I don't know.
Is it the Winchester Mystery House?
The Winchester Mystery House,
Yeah.
which, if you've never heard of this, dear listeners, it's essentially, depending on, it's actually, the reason it reminded me, though, is the same time. So the San Jose Chronicle in the 1890s published an article talking about the Winchester Mystery House saying, and essentially, I think they were the first ones to acknowledge or publish this sort of myth or mystery, or I don't even know what you'd call it, around the Lady Winchester, basically saying that she thought she would die if the house was ever complete. So she would have people come in and randomly build things. There are stairwells that lead nowhere, that just lead into walls. There are weird shallow steps and very steep steps. There's
like rooms behind rooms that you can't access anymore, I
rooms
think.
you can't access. There's windows that open up to nothing. And now I will say later, sort of evidence has shown that there was a massive earthquake in the area, and it looks like the house was damaged but not rebuilt. It was simply renovated after the earthquake. So it could have been simply that some part of the house was damaged enough to have it shut off, which explains the stairwells and the windows into nothing, and the shallow steps were just simply Lady Winchester and her husband of the Winchester gun companies were just simply getting old, and steep steps aren't as fun as shallow steps when you're getting old. But it still reminded me of it because it was around the same time where both late 1800s where a house is constantly being built. So I thought that was a fascinating just little parallel. Now, while Caesar was the guiding force behind the house in the sense that he was the one who came up with a lot of the ideas, and honestly, he was his money, it was still a group effort. And that is interesting because a lot of the historical sort of writing about it makes it known that it was a group effort, like kind of almost wants to show that it was a group effort.
Okay.
So whether it was the sort of local designers, local builders, master craftsmen and tradesmen, all basically having a say in what something should look like. There was also, at the time, a man named Giulio, and I'm going to say it very American, but Giulio Cesare Ferrari, or Julius Caesar Ferrari, great name. He was a painter and he was one of the collaborators. He did a lot of these like drawings and renditions of the building basically to figure out like, we can move this here, we can shift this there. And while he wasn't an architect, he apparently was one of the ideas guys behind the whole thing. So he's like, we have this idea. And they would bring in an architect to say, that doesn't work because that's not how physics works. And he's like, that doesn't matter. I'm the ideas guy.
Okay.
That apparently continued for a bit, but that is why it has so many kind of weird additions here and there. After Caesar's death, his adopted son, whose name is Mario, and I'm just going to call him Mario for the purpose of this podcast, continued the electro-homeopathy practice and the construction of the house, and it was under him that a lot of the Art Nouveau elements were added. They were called Liberty elements, like the Liberty Bell, but it's interesting because Liberty is just apparently an architectural term for Italian Art Nouveau. So while there is the French Art Nouveau and the Spanish Art Nouveau, Liberty meant specifically Italian Art Nouveau, which I thought was just interesting, I think, as a point of interest. So all good things must come to an end, unfortunately, and it is so with this house. In the late 1950s, the house was sold to an entrepreneur who attempted to turn it into a hotel and sort of tourist attraction because at this point it had these beautiful Moorish, arabesque, sort of rounded, domed spirals. It had this sort of black and white entranceway. It was like sort of again, it was a sort of the Alhambra. Apparently, is what it was inspired by.
Okay.
Interesting too. I think if I'm not mistaken, there is a church on the island of Sardinia that also has this black and white stripe thing, and it's only weird because it's indicative of a church built in Pisa, but it's nowhere near Pisa, and it just simply is. It's one of those historical things to say that, like, oh, clearly Pisans had gone to this and built a church at some point when they were expanding the Pisan Empire, and then left. So now the church is literally off the side of like the highway,
Oh, weird.
by itself randomly. Like you're driving in the middle of nowhere, and there's this beautiful black and white striped church, and then you just keep going.
Is it like the one is it Florence or Siena that has the large stripes?
Siena.
Siena.
And it's similar to that. So it's just black and white stripes, but it's apparently very indicative of this sort of, it's like a Moorish element or Moorish revival element.
Cool.
So it's all over the place. It has the classic medieval turrets. It's just wild, right? And I wanted to say that because this entrepreneur bought it and thought this would make a great hotel and tourist resort in the 50s, which, to be fair, I've seen some tourism things in the 50s. It would be amazing. It would blow some socks off.
It also is a bit continuing the original purpose with the sanatorium, the sort of health spa-ness of the original building.
Exactly. And I think that was part of it as well, is wanting to kind of make it at least like kind of honor a little bit of that tradition, that earlier tradition. And I will also add that it basically worked genuinely up until about the 80s. He went bankrupt and the hotel closed in the 80s. But for a good 30 years, it actually kind of prevented it from being destroyed. And unfortunately, after the 80s, it fell into total disrepair. It was abandoned. It was just falling apart. And it wasn't until 2005 when the same bank, the foundation for the Savings Bank of Bologna, actually ended up buying the Rocchetta from I think it was from the family, like the family of the entrepreneur, like whoever still owned it.
Okay.
And essentially they wanted to turn it into they classified it as an architectural monument, or at least got the state to classify it as an architectural monument, and began repairing it, and opened it to the public finally, I think in 2015. So you could visit it, but you could only visit about 2/3 of the house. The rest of the third, and that's the biggest part, because it's the Moorish arabesque part of the house that actually was still like it wasn't unfinished. It was unfinished basically.
Okay.
So and actually, I think it's 2024. What are we in 2026?
Yeah,
2 years ago. A project began to restore the Moorish Arabic part of the house to a point where people could go in there and visit it without it being like
Dangerous.
Yeah. Like there's
Super
holes in the
cool.
floor. So I thought that was that was the history. Now I thought it'd be fun to talk about the house. I'm also trying to bring up some images on my phone because I was going to ask Darcy to look at the images at a certain point.
Yeah. I think I've seen one picture of it. I know ish what it looks like from a far away point.
From a far away point. And well, if you haven't seen, you should also see some pictures, especially dear listener. I will do my best, but to look at pictures of the inside, it is kind of wild in terms of just. Well, actually, I have in my notes. If you've ever played the game Blueprints, which is which you might not have, it's a very quiet, calm game where you just build a house.
It's a video game.
It's a video game. You build a house, a room after room, and there's all sorts of rooms. And honestly, this house, it's like I would not have been surprised to know that the game was inspired by this house, because at a certain point, the house was built to be a labyrinth or labyrinthesque in its construction. I think, again, not originally. It seems just more after the fact. And I will throw in now, it did lead to, after his death, it led to a lot of people assuming there's like esoteric or sort of magical connotations to it. And at the time, there are no references to that. There's no like, oh, I built this because of this reason. It's for the spirits, or because it faces north, or, it's on the so-and-so meridian. None of that exists in like writing. He just seemed to build a labyrinth for the enjoyment of it, like just love of the game, I guess. So there's a network of staircases, courtyards, passages, terraces, and they all kind of lead you to this idea of never really knowing where you are in the house.
Cool.
And in that, again, I kind of going back to like this idea of the inspiration. I already mentioned the Alhambra, which is in Spain, and there's the Pomposa Abbey in Italy, which is a very like traditionally sort of Italian, beautiful abbey, I guess. But it's just, he really kind of took a little bit of everything, essentially. He's like, I like that. And not even and sometimes it was as simple as like, like not necessarily like I like the columns or whatever, but it's like I like that bust or I like that sculpture. I like that one tiny thing, and I'm going to have that in my house essentially. Without going into all the rooms, because I assume you'll see them if you ever go, I did want to mention some of the rooms just because I thought they were kind of cool.
Can I see pictures of them?
Well, I was going to, in a second, I was going to show you a picture of one of them specifically. The first one, that was the Hall of the 90. It is a mausoleum dedicated to Queen Victoria that was then turned into a ballroom dancing room.
Odd.
It is, but according to like anecdotal, totally, unfounded, Mario, the adopted son, wanted to celebrate his 90th birthday in that room, surrounded by 89 other people about to turn 90. And he never did, but I thought it was a kind of a cute
I love that idea.
thing. And I was going to ask you though, so this is the chapel, and I was going to ask you to describe to the, and this is the next room, so describe to the listeners both the columns and the ceiling.
Okay. Well, first of all, in the center of this picture, it looks like there's a crypt.
Yes, so that is Caesar Mattei.
Okay. There's a crypt with some colorful sort of placard. They're not placards. They're probably made out of stone along the side. And then around it, so it's kind of set into a corner, it seems. And around it are arches. And the arches are incredible striped white and black stone that lead up to a ceiling that I'm guessing these squares in the ceiling are like a Moorish style. I don't know. They're very curly Q-y.
What would you say the material of the ceiling is?
I'm guessing it's stone.
So it's designed to look like carved wood, but in fact,
does look
it's
like carved
oil
wood.
on canvas.
Oh, they did a great job.
They did a great job.
What is that called? Trump oil?
Yeah,
Trump oil?
yeah. Was that the it's fake oil, whatever you're looking at is fake, but specific with oil.
Yeah, it's really interesting colors too, because the walls, these column and archways are white and black essentially. So is the ceiling for the most part, but then the sort of the opening of the archway is an odd terracotta color. So is the floor, and then the crypt has lots of different, it's like blue and green and black and all kinds of yellow. So it's interesting.
And that is actually, I want you to keep some of that in your mind.
Okay.
As we continue, because it will come up later. But that does combine elements from the Mosque of Cordoba with just classic medieval Italian church elements. So again, it was like, I like the columns, I like this, and I like the ceiling, and I want the,
You know what it's giving?
Tell me.
It's giving Cheesecake Factory.
Fascinating. I think that would be crushing for him to know.
Well, okay, I only say that because there are classically, or I'm not going to go into it today because I really don't know enough about it.
I feel like half our listeners also don't know what Cheesecake Factory is.
So there is the, what is it called? It's just the Cheesecake Factory is what it's called,
Yeah, I
right?
think so.
Okay. It's a chain
I've
of,
never been,
okay,
to be clear.
I think I've been once. A chain of restaurants in the United States, and I highly encourage you to look it up if you're into interior design or weird things, or maybe even architecture. Your head might explode with sadness potentially. The person who designed the interiors did a wild mishmash of a bunch of different architectural and interior design styles intentionally. It looks like a fever dream. Some people like it, some people don't, but this reminds me of that.
Of the fever dream.
Yes,
That makes sense.
because it's fever dream mishmash of different styles. I'm not trying to throw shade on this castle, this house, or Cheesecake Factory. It's just a mishmash.
I feel like nobody goes to Cheesecake Factory for the cheesecake. Feels like you just go there for the ambiance.
Yeah, and the 120 items on the menu.
Exactly.
So there we go.
So the Cheesecake Factory. There are also other rooms, such as the Hanging Gardens and the Terraced Gardens. There is the Courtyard of Lions, which is a tiny version of the Court of Lions, which I thought was cute. It's like, he's not big enough to be a court, so he's like, it's a courtyard of lions, which is in Alhambra. There's a music room, the Hall of Peace, which is a bit ironic because it was built after World War I as a celebration of peace. And then ironic because in World War II, the house was occupied and then damaged heavily. So
Okay.
didn't last that very long. There's also a room called the Hall of Oblivion, which is Mario, the son's, Mattei's private study. And then there's the Red Room, also known as the Count's Room. Again, this is what makes me think of blueprints, but there's like red rooms and this rooms and that rooms. Very cool. Now, going back to this chapel, you said this looks like stone, and then I mentioned that that's not woodwork or stone ceiling, but that's oil on canvas. The most interesting thing about this room, this house, is that almost everything is trompe l'oeil. Everything is fake. Very little of the marble is marble. And in fact, almost none of the marble is marble. All of it is either like gypsum painted to look like marble.
Fascinating.
There's a huge use of carved wood and painted canvas, painted canvas to look like carved wood. Marble finishings are typically just gypsum and paint. There's even like a lot of these sculptural elements he had were all just paper mache, then attached to a wall.
Wild.
And that unfortunately also led to one of the reasons it fell apart so quickly
course.
is when it went in there, it was like all these things that like, oh, that's supposed to be all wood and stone
Right.
is in fact paper mache, and this, this gypsum powder, if it gets wet, it's just like,
Yeah, things that could very much be damaged just by time and like humidity.
and that's the thing. So it's basically almost a house where you can't trust anything or everything is just a dream.
I love that.
And that brings me to the end of the Rocchetta Mattei, as it's just some fun bits of practical information. You can visit the house. It is, like I said, restored. It is 12 euros a person. It is only open on weekends and holidays, and you must take the guided tour. You cannot go alone walking around because apparently
sense.
people keep getting lost. So,
Oh, no.
yeah, apparently it's like this is a labyrinth. You will not find your way out. You cannot leave by yourself.
Oh, I really want to go.
I know. So, and they are, like I said, they're working to restore the other part of this more Moorish Arabesque part into something that you can actually visit and actually
Really neat.
and see. But for now, it's only certain rooms on the tour.
And is it located on top of a mountain or a mountainy area?
It is. It's basically over. It's the same. It's the same where it started. They didn't move the house. It overlooks the Reno Valley.
Yes, you did say
but
that.
it does, and it's like on a very rocky promontory type of area. I mean, it looks again. I would have been not surprised. But basically, like again, it's like if you've seen some of those German castles that are like right on top of a hill or right on top of a mountain, and you're just like, that's a Disney castle.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what clearly the inspiration was before. And I don't, again, before like
And what did you say it was built on top of the ruins of?
a medieval castle.
A medieval castle. That makes sense because even where we are in the South, I don't know the times that these castles would have been in use, but there are a lot of ruins of small castles up on hills and mountains near where we are that are almost completely ruined, almost completely destroyed and gone. But I can understand how that would look like kind of near where we are, where there's a little castle at the top of a sort of town, maybe where we are, but not at like the very top peak.
Exactly. No, and that's I mean, of course, too, I was on a very unrelated note. I happen to be doing some research for the Castle of Salerno. And one of the things that people had pointed out now, of course, the castle in Salerno is reachable, easily-ish. There we go. But in the 1800s, when it fell into disuse as a castle, and the capital of Salerno became, I think, Naples. Like, I mean, essentially, Salerno was kind of gobbled up into another sort of country. The castle was almost entirely unreachable because the road that had led there wasn't like permanent. It wasn't designed to essentially be if we need to withstand a siege, we can kind of like the road isn't paved stone, making it easy to get something up here. It's just dirt. So I think there were a couple I think English writers who had incredible difficulty trying to just get to this castle. And I only mention that because now, again, where we live and the area around us, there's a lot of convents and castles that you're like, oh, how do people get there? They don't. Yeah. They just sort of look at it from below.
Yeah.
And that's like this one. It is, if you know your Italian sort of geography slightly, between Florence and Bologna, there's a strip of mountains. In fact, I think the train has to go under the mountains there, but that is where the Rocchetta Mattei is. Okay. It's near a little town called Riola, but if you are in Bologna, or honestly in Florence, it's a little bit farther away from Florence than it is from Bologna. It's a very easy day trip. Again, only open on the weekends or holidays. You do have to book in advance. But besides that, it is
And do you have to have a car to get there, you think?
Probably.
Okay.
Though I'm willing to bet there is some kind of bus there because it is, while it's off the beaten path for sure, it is actually a massive, like they do get a fair number of visitors every year. Okay. Not massive, but it is known. It is known. Okay. Yeah. It's a lot of people come to see it. So it is something that you shouldn't struggle to get to if you have to take a bus rather than renting a car.
Cool.
And that has been the Rocchetta Mattei.
Wow. I loved that. And there's so many, when you hear our episode coming out on Friday, there are so many similarities between this story and the story that I'm going to be telling. It's really fascinating.
It sounds like an ad for the next episode. I mean, in a good way, it sounds
Oh,
like,
yeah, I didn't
but
mean
if you
for it
want to
to
know the
be.
next episode, this
I'm
sounds
just
very
trying not to
similar.
give too much away. I'm holding in my mind the similarities.
I love that though. So I think that is everything for me.
That
I
was
hope that
great. I loved it.
encourages you. If you are going to Bologna or if you are going to Florence and you are looking to do something just a little bit weird and different, then you can go and explore the home of electro-homeopathy and also the fever dream of 40 odd people who designed to build a house together that
Amazing.
just never finished, basically. I mean, it is now, kind of, but, wasn't
Still
for a
being
while.
finished.
Still being finished.
As
Yeah,
of
really, it is. It's
2024.
still
That's
being
exciting.
renovated. So, yeah, I hope if you go, y'all send photos.
Yeah, please do.
And if we go, we will actually probably take photos and finally post them on our Instagram.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. Tanti abbracci.